righty. I love being back here. I had the pleasure and honour of talking last year, and delighted to be invited back again and to see you all here. I love this venue. It has a great feel to it, doesn't it? Alrighty. So my name's Tim. I'm from Brisbane. I help run Bitcoin Brisbane up there. I've had the pleasure of being part of JP's Bitcoin Sydney, and lots of people in this room and from Bitcoin Sydney helped me learn over the last 7 or 8 years. So I wanted to share today a little bit about Bitcoin and Bitcoin's history. So where did Bitcoin come from? But let's start with, a couple of photos from with some advice from the European Central Bank, the ECB. So they popped up some good advice for everyone. I think this was after Chris was in Europe last year. I think he might have had a sit down with Christine Lagarde and convinced her to pop this up on the ECB building. Important to note that the message is not buy Bitcoin. The message is study Bitcoin, learn Bitcoin. And I'm hopeful that a lot of you here today are going to learn a few things that perhaps you didn't know before and get the opportunity to talk to many others. So just a few little things that always pop into my head. Foundationally, there are only 21 million Bitcoin. Now, Bitcoin is split into units of 100 million sats per Bitcoin in the same way that dollars are split into cents. So you can buy $1 worth of Bitcoin, or you can buy as much as you can afford. Bitcoin is an open network. It's software that people who like to run Bitcoin run all over the world. Every single country in the world has people running the Bitcoin nodes, and it is an open monetary network. That is, there is no permission seeking, there is no gatekeeping. If Bitcoin has some qualities that you think might be good for you, you can run a Bitcoin node. You don't have to. You can just own Bitcoin. Bitcoin is text. So everything about Bitcoin is open and available to be verified. The source code that the original software was written in and every change that was made after that, the transactions, the addresses, and even the secrets, the private keys, they're all text. It's pseudonymous, like cash. So if I go down to my friend here, who's a butcher, and I buy $20 worth of his excellent sausages, and I hand across the $20, he hands me the sausages. I'm a happy camper. He's a happy camper. Did he need to KYC me? Did he need to know where my money came from? Of course not. That's what cash is. So Bitcoin is like cash. Bitcoin also, for the first time in history, gives everyone private property rights. So the possession of a Bitcoin private key, the secret, is the property rights to that. And later this afternoon, Kai is going to talk about Bitcoin and private property. That's a great session if you haven't seen it. This is probably one of my favourite aspects of Bitcoin, that it is opt-in. No one's going to force you to use Bitcoin. If there are things about Bitcoin that are useful to you, that appeal to you, then you can use Bitcoin. Chris was saying that after his chat with Christine, that she didn't seem to be very keen on Bitcoin for some reason, and she was probably going to not opt in. She was just going to opt out, and that's okay. Abundance. For those of you that have heard of Jeff Booth or read his book, The Price of Tomorrow, thank you. Thank you for covering that brain fart. There's a lovely little phrase that has stuck with me, that is, abundance in money drives scarcity everywhere. Scarcity in money drives abundance everywhere. And for those of us that can look back the last few years and think about the gigantic amount of money that was poured into the economy from central banks all around the world, and the subsequent shortages that arose in part from that, it's a very interesting point. Bitcoin is consuming the monetary premium of other asset classes. So as people understand Bitcoin is better money, Bitcoin starts to consume some of that value that's been pushed into other asset classes that people have used essentially as a savings vehicle. Probably our favourite one here in Australia and in many parts of the world is property. Bitcoin has no masters. There's no CEO. I tried to ring him up the other day. The fact it doesn't even have voicemail, you know, you get that message, the voicemail's full, you can't even leave a message. No, it's just hopeless. Bitcoin is rules without rulers. So we don't find that there's a monthly committee that disappears behind closed doors and decides how many Bitcoin there's going to be next month. That's kind of a central banking thing. Bitcoin has a fixed supply. It's known issuance. Unfortunately or fortunately, depending on which way you like to look at it, that will never change. And lastly, one of the things that I like about, I've just seen a little countdown clock. One of the things that I like about Bitcoin is summarized by Victor Hugo, and that is, nothing is more powerful than an idea whose time has come. So there's a few little things about what Bitcoin is and aspects of it. Myself and Farmer Jen will be talking later this morning up on the Nakamoto stage upstairs, about 11:30, I think, and we'll explore some of these a bit more. But where did Bitcoin come from? So Bitcoin was released in 2008, the white paper, and the first running of the Bitcoin software was in early 2009. And we know it was on or after the 3rd of January because in the header block, which is that little block highlighted in orange, we can see a reference to the heading or the banner on the Times edition from London, the printed copy, Chancellor on brink of second bailout for banks. A number of days later, the first other person joined the network and mined the next block. Fast forward 15 years, and today, block number 835,700, probably while we're having drinks this evening, will be mined. There are now millions of people who use Bitcoin on every country in the world. It's 15 years old. There's around about 978 million Bitcoin transactions. That's not counting the second and third layer transactions. And its market capitalisation is about Australian $2 trillion. But where did it come from? So the Guy Fawkes mask, which some of you may recognise from V for Vendetta and many other sort of activist movements, is often used to depict Satoshi. Now, Satoshi was the author of Bitcoin, wrote the original software and wrote the white paper. I find it fascinating that he wrote the code first, then he wrote the white paper. And as a software engineer, I went, yeah, that's write first, document second. I know about that. And what does engineering discipline tell us to do? Plan first, write next. But we don't know anything about Satoshi, or very little. We don't know whether he was a man, whether they were a woman, or whether they were a group. But we do know that Satoshi was one of the early cypherpunks. So who are they? So the cypherpunks were formed in about 1992, and they were a group of early cryptographers and privacy advocates that were looking ahead. And remember, this is very early in the days of the internet. This was just when the first universities were starting to be connected, way after I finished uni. And these were people who were going, so now my university is connected to your university, And her university is connected to their university. And they were looking decades into the future and going, at some point, everybody's going to have a computer. Everyone will be on the internet. And that could become some hellacious surveillance nightmare of a panopticon. And so they were very concerned about privacy. Now, today, that seems very obvious. Pretty much everyone in this room will have a smartphone. Everyone has an internet connection. No one says, do you use the internet? Of course you do. But this was before the internet even existed. And the parallels to Bitcoin is they were very early. They were perhaps a little bit special in the way they looked out. And I'm sure if they were talking to their mates saying, this is what I think is going to happen in 20, 30, 40, 50 years' time, they probably got similar looks to when you sit down with some of your friends and talk about Bitcoin and say, Bitcoin's going to become global money. And people are like, dude, have another drink. So the year after they were founded, Eric Hughes, who was one of the founders, wrote the Cypherpunks Manifesto, and the essence of it which was to talk about privacy, saying it's necessary for an open society in a digital age or electronic age. It's a necessary component for open society. Privacy is not secrecy. Privacy is the power to selectively reveal oneself to the world. So that choice about revealing oneself, who got doxed in the Optus hack? Who got doxed in the Medibank hack? Who got doxed with, there's a long, long list. So I think more and more people are starting to become aware that privacy is an important thing. And the cypherpunks talked about, well, how do we make that happen? How do we, do we go and engage with regulators? Do we speak to legislators? Do we go and lobby? And in the end, they went, yeah, nah. Cypherpunks write code. So the cypherpunks said, we're not going to bother with any of that stuff because it's never going to be effective. What we want to do is write the tools, write the software, build the tools that enable privacy. And so they did. So Bitcoin was the capstone on about 40 years of innovation. It did not come out of nowhere. So I won't go through all of these, but just a few key ones to illustrate. So TCP/IP, which is the backbone of all modern communication networks, was formalized in 1974 by Cerf and Kahn. 1976, Whitfield Diffie and Martin Hellman invented public key cryptography. That was a key thing because I should have made a dad joke out of that. So that was the problem of, if I've got a secret and someone else has a secret and we want to share those secrets, but we want to do it across an open network, how do you share a secret without the secret being revealed? They figured that out. That formed the basis of all future secure communication on the internet today. Merkle trees from Ralph Merkle. That was about how do you collect bunches of keys together and organize them. David Chaum, interestingly, not a cypherpunk, but a brilliant cryptographer. Elliptic curve cryptography, heavily used within Bitcoin by Satoshi. Phil Zimmermann. Phil Zimmermann, you could argue, started off the original crypto wars, and that was the cryptography wars. So with the release of, I guess in combination, public key cryptography and then PGP, pretty good privacy, everyone on the planet could have pretty good privacy at a level that couldn't be hacked by nation states. There were a lot of people that weren't happy about that, and that started off a long series of legal battles, ultimately resulting in recognition that all software is open text and is covered in the US under the Second Amendment. right to free speech. The cypherpunks were founded in 92. Adam Back, who is cited in the white paper, which Satoshi wrote defining Bitcoin, he invented Hashcash in 1997. Adam was frustrated with the amount of spam email he was getting, and so he figured if there was some way to tie the computational cost of sending email, then he'd get less email because people would actually have to do some work. Unfortunately, as an outcome, we're still getting loads more spam. But the thinking there became part of Satoshi's design for Bitcoin. WeDie was also quoted in, referenced in Satoshi's work. He established B-Money in 98. And BitTorrent, Bram Cohen. I mean, I'm sure none of you good law-abiding citizens has ever used a torrent to download something that you were trying to get that maybe wasn't available anymore because it had been lost or for some other reason. But that idea of torrenting, of peer-to-peer communication between people on the internet was also a foundational component of Bitcoin. And then the reusable proof of work, Hal Finney defined that in 2004, also turns up in Satoshi's design. So the key point I want to make here is that Bitcoin did not come out of nowhere. Satoshi was not a godhead that produced Bitcoin that came down from heaven or wherever you believe mystical things come from. But he was a technologist, a cypherpunk, a software engineer of pretty good renown, but as many of the amendments to the Bitcoin code over the years have shown, not the greatest coder ever, but his design was pure genius. The importance of understanding this is that there isn't a better version 2 around the corner. And this is where a lot of the altcoin currencies come from. There's 20, 30, 40, 50,000 of them that have taken a copy of the Bitcoin code, invented a new logo, maybe changed a couple of parameters, and then launched it as a private team. And they all fail. They're very good at making their founders richer. And I like, for those of you that have listened to a bit of a guy called American Hodl, he neatly summarizes it as shitcoiners are into Bitcoin. They're just into your Bitcoin. And so I think understanding some of the evolution of technology that led to Bitcoin helps give a foundation of understanding about how seminal Bitcoin is and why it can't be copied. But the capstone becomes the launchpad. So a number of things have followed Bitcoin. Liquid, a side chain on Bitcoin. Lightning is a faster transactional payment layer on top of Bitcoin. Fedi and Cashew are what are referred to as Chaumian eCash. Chaumian referring back to David Chaum. So David defined Chaumian, where was it? In 1983. I think it's ironic that it's taken 40 years for those ideas to come back, and now they've actually got an implementation built on top of Bitcoin. So highly private cash built on top of Bitcoin. Fascinating to watch those happen. A couple of things that are orthogonal to Bitcoin, not directly on Bitcoin. Keat for private video, text, and voice communication. And something that's come up really only over the last 12 to 18 months is Nostr. Notes and other stuff transmitted on relays. So this is going to be interesting. At the moment, the primary use case appears to be a social network. But like Bitcoin, it has no centralizing authority. It has no single control. and I've been enjoying it. There are a lot of Bitcoiners and a lot of Bitcoin knowledge on Nostr. So you may want to go and check that out. Lastly, the thing that tripped me up as someone coming from a technology background, therefore focusing on the technology on Bitcoin, was I missed what Bitcoin actually is. So the actual innovation in Bitcoin from Satoshi was not technical, it was economic. So we can verify that there will only be 21 million Bitcoin, and we know exactly how many Bitcoin there are at any point of any day. And as I run a Bitcoin node, and anyone here in this room who also runs it, we can run a simple command and it will tell us that. That's not something that the Reserve Bank of Australia or the Federal Reserve in the US can do. So verifiable digital scarcity only gets to be invented once. After that, it's a copy. So the key thing there is the technical innovation enabled the economic innovation, the digital scarcity. So I hope that helps. Give a little bit of context to Bitcoin, and thank you very much.